Hey YouTube, in this video I'm going to do a deck profile on the updated Shadow Witches. So we went over the Genesis ones, now we're going to go over the Shadow Paladin ones. So Shadow Paladin, the Witches specifically, they're a strange deck. They were really good when they first came out. Then everything got buffed around them, then Stride came out, and they kind of fell off the deep end because Stride was just a lot faster than them. And then Shadow Paladin did not get their Stride units for a while. And then obviously Diablo came out and all this stuff. And the Shadow Witches are interesting because unlike most Shadow Paladin decks, which can easily run Phantom Blast or Diablo, the Shadow Witches actually struggle to run Diablo. So they can't really use Diablo effectively. And the reason why they can't is because Diablo, if we look at him here, Diablo retires, like if you want to get the real usefulness of his effect where he gains 10,000, he gains critical, but then in addition to that, you can retire 3 and then the opponent has to retire 2, otherwise they cannot guard him at all. In order to benefit from that, you have to really do the retire of 3. And Shadow Witches actually struggle from recovering from that because that's such a hefty cost of retiring your like half of your field basically, that there's oftentimes where if you do that early on and you do not have a very good hand, and they somehow survive, because like you're up against Gold Paladin or something, and they can easily replenish their field, or even Neo Nectar, then you're gonna have a hard time trying to regain advantage if your opponent lives. So the deck definitely, in my opinion, requires a lot more skill to play correctly and effectively compared to your run-of-the-mill like Claret Sword and Phantom Blaster and the Revengers and all the other stuff. But it's definitely a very rewarding deck to play when you win using this deck. A lot of people, a lot of like players that aren't really that good at the game, in my opinion, kind of think that the Shadow Witches are OP, but in reality they're really not. They require a lot of skill to play correctly. So without further ado, we'll get into the deck now. 4, Mesmerizing Witch Fianna. So Fianna is still the main Vanguard that you want to use early. You want to ride this first. Because it's just really good. It messes up the opponent's field. Anyone who's played Witches by now, they've been around long enough to know how it works. Otherwise, those who have never seen it before, this card is really good. Like it counterblasts 2 when it's in Legion, and then the opponent reveals the top 10 cards from their deck, and you pick 2 rearguard circles on their field, and then they take 2 grade 0s, which are triggers usually. And they place those on the rearguard circles. So the opponent gets to pick the rearguard grade 0s that will go on the field. You get to pick the rearguard circles. So in addition to that, she has a non-Legion effect. Once per turn, she can retire either a copy of her on the field, a rearguard, or the Legion Mate, which is a grade 2, to draw 2 cards if they have 2 grade 0s or more. So really good card. The other grade 3 is Rhea's. Cultist Witch Rhea's, she was kind of in, there was like a broken deck before Extreme Format came out where her with like Spike Brothers and Merc was some weird build and was really good and kind of broken, which that along with the Abomination deck, which was the Phantom Blaster and Thing Saver deck, kind of forced Extreme Format to be a thing. But anyway, for Rhea's, she's your game finisher. She's kind of like the one that you want to close out the game. But sometimes you can still win with just Fianna. Rhea's, you don't really want to ride her first. If you do, you'll probably end up striding by discarding your Fiannas and stuff. But Rhea's is just still pretty good Vanguard overall. For grade 2, 4 of Inspection Witch Deirdre. This is Rhea's Legion Mate. So this thing, when it's placed on the rearguard circle, and the Vanguard has Witch in the name, you soul blast 1. They take a 0 and put it on there. You pick the circle, and they put the 0 from the drop zone. So it's also a pretty good card. Rhea's also has an effect similar to Fianna, which she can do without being in Legion. She can actually counterblast 2, pick a rearguard circle. The opponent reveals 5 cards on the top of the deck. So it's like a miniature version of her effect. It's definitely not as effective because revealing 10 is a lot more likely to get 0s than just revealing 5. But it's still pretty good depending on if the opponent got a lot of 0s early or not. Next, 4, Witch of Reality Femme. This is Fianna's Legion Mate. You can tell by the color. This is just the 12k for the Shadow Witches, but it's Legion Mate, so it's pretty good. And then 3 of this new cards. So Witch of Secret Books, Adra. She came out recently, so I put her in here at 3 copies. Took out Nevin, Skullwitch Nevin, and Vaha. So basically, when the opponent has grade 2 or more, grade 0s, which is kind of the thing that you try to do, you really want the opponent to get 2 zeros at least on the field, if not more. So that's the goal of the deck. It's one of the main things. Then this is an 11k, and then when it hits a Vanguard, it gets to countercharge 1, so it unflips, and then it soul charges 1. And the deck does Soul Blast quite a bit for like Deirdre and the grade 1 equivalent. And it's very counterblast heavy, so this is a pretty good addition in my opinion. For grade 1s, I'm now running 4 of the Little Witch Nevin to replace Skull Witch Nevin. And also, we're no longer running Barrier Witch Granny and the generic Perfect Guards because the 4 of these are pretty good because the witches tend to need to draw through the deck like all other Shadow Paladin decks do. So this is just a natural fit. It has Witch in the name, so it works with the drawing cards and stuff. So 4 of this. And then 4 Dana. Same thing as Deirdre, only it's grade 1. So 4 of it's really good to maintain the zeros on their field. And then 3 of the Sakurna. This combos very well with Ria's as a game finisher. It can, because negative numbers are a thing in Vanguard. These 2 together can help you get negative numbers. This basically minuses 5k from the Vanguard for every grade 0 on their field. So the 2 of this new card is another new card they got. So which is familiar? Kuroma. This is like the replacement to Skull Witch Nevin. Basically, when you place it on R, you can, if the opponent has 2 or more grade 0s, you can discard 1 witch card from the hand. So again, that's why we're maxing these. And you can draw 2 cards. So it replaces Nevin. And it doesn't use Counterblast, which is what I like about it. Nevin used Counterblast. So you want to minimize the Counterblast because Fianna and Riaz and all those guys, they do a lot of it. And then the last grade 1 is 1 Witch of Nostrum Aranhud, just because I don't want to run 3 of this, because this is a 5k boost, this is a 7k boost. Originally I was running 3 of this, so I'm trying these out. For grade 0s, I'm still sticking with the stand triggers, although I have been tempted to switch them out for draw triggers because I'm not running the Quintet Wall anymore. And oftentimes I notice that the witches have to commit to the field, and they fall behind in hand advantage because of that. So 4 of this, because it's still easy to pull them out of the deck with the starter's effect and to unflip and soul charge. So I still think it's pretty good, especially in the late game with Riaz. If you know you've got a couple of these in the deck still, you attack with the rear guard while they're like at -1 or something, or -4. And then if you check the stand, then that's just extra attack. So it's really good. And then 4 of the new witch cards that they got back in GBT03. So Doves going, again, it has the effect that can go off when they're in Legion. So it's another thing like Sakurna, it does the -5k. Then 4 more Witch Critical and the Witch Heal. So the witches now actually have a complete, although I guess they have for a while now, they have like all witches as the triggers, which is really good. So 8 critical, 4 stand, 4 draw, and then the starter is still the Witch of Banquet's Leer, because really the only good starter they have besides Creeping Dark Goat. But Creeping Dark Goat uses Counterblast and it can whiff, which I don't like. So I want to conserve the Counterblast. This thing is really good with pulling out 2 of the stand trigger, so you don't have to even worry too much about the stands. When in early Legion, when you don't stride that early for whatever reason, or you do stride, you still have open field, so you can just pull these out and you countercharge 2 and soul charge 2 that way. So like I said, very high level play deck required. Otherwise, you'll probably lose a lot of matches if you don't know what you're doing. For the stride deck, 1 Dark Knight Grim Recruiter. Honestly, this is probably the best stride target for the witches. I still only have 1, but ideally you want to run like 2, if not more, of that. So I have 1 Dark Knight Efnisen, which is kind of like the backup for this guy. So those, and then I've got 2 Diablo, because you can actually go into it. Sometimes you can actually close a game with this guy, but you definitely don't need 4. I have 4 of this, but I don't use more than 2. I'm not going to bring it out more than once, because like I said, the witches, they commit to the field, and they don't have a way to refill the field besides going into Grim Recruiter, which is usually the first stride anyway, so really only just 2 Diablo. And then 2 Aura Geyser. He is actually okay in here. He's actually better than Diablo in my opinion in the Witches build. But he gives you 10k shields, so he does add to your hand. That's good because Witches tend to have some struggling with keeping cards in the hand. But yeah, Aura Geyser at 2, just to pull him off once per game. And then I am running 2 Madu, because Madu is also really good stride target if you can't go into Grim Recruiter for whatever reason. Because it doesn't use Counterblast, and if you're in Legion, you get a grade 3 back, so you can go into like Aura Geyser or Diablo later on. Or you can, for example, you're sitting on Fianna, you have Arias, you discard the Arias, go into Madu, assuming you're in Legion, and then if you have a Fianna in here, you can fetch it back, so next turn, if you're going to use Fianna's Legion skill, you can call this, retire it, and draw 2 cards. So there's like different kind of plays, which is why Madu is better at 2 than just running 1 copy of him. So anyway, that was the Witch deck. It's still one of the more interesting Shadow Paladin decks out there. You don't see it that often. Most people are sticking with the Abyss, the Phantom stuff, and variations of the Diablo teched in with Revengers and stuff like that. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I certainly find this deck really fun to play as. And stay tuned for more Cardfight Vanguard videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.